Good evening, everybody. Brian Newbert here from goldenblack.com. The first time you have seen me outside of a stadium or an arena in quite some time. First time you've seen me in a couple weeks, period. Much to your delight, I'm quite certain. Um, Dawned on me the other day that the last time you saw me, I was in State Farm Stadium at the Final Four, and I had promised you a season wrap video, not just the post game wrap video from that game. And I am nothing but hyper focused and outcome oriented, and I completely forgot about that. Much like that ill fated goldenblack.com Purdue Basketball Daily. If you'll recall that glorious 7 episode run to start the season. Um, so here I am. It is late. But better late than never, a wise man once told me, or a wise woman, I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was in a song, I don't know. Maybe it's just common law wisdom. Thank you to the Purdue Club Hotel, as always, for your support, not just this season, but all these seasons past, and hopefully many more into the future. We appreciate it very much. As you can tell, I'm not in a Purdue Union Club hotel right now. I'm in my office at home, my messy, messy office that requires a significant desk cleaning here. Um, just going to talk about the season that was here for a few minutes. Um, Obviously, the greatest basketball season probably in Purdue basketball history. It's really hard to compare eras, really hard to stack up something that happened in 2024 to something that happened in 1930. But I'm comfortable calling it the greatest season in Purdue basketball history. Ends in the national title game against UConn, the only team this season whose best was better than Purdue's best. Did Purdue play its best game in the national title game? Probably not, but that was because of UConn. And even if Purdue had played its best game, I think UConn's best still would have been enough. Up to this point, up to that point, I should say, no one's best was better than Purdue's best. Purdue was one of the best teams in college basketball. Obviously, I think the UConn game showed us who was actually the best team in college basketball all season long, but Purdue was certainly in that conversation all year long, and there were a lot of reasons to that. One was, obviously Zach Edey did the borderline impossible. How you can be the best player in college basketball by a wide margin one year, and then come back the next year and be even better, and really end any debate about who would be the National Player of the Year again within weeks of the start of the season, which is essentially what happened. I shouldn't call that impossible because, Zach Edey's trajectory as a basketball player was still very much pointing upward, and I think NBA people need to understand that here in the next few weeks. But it was a lot to ask. A really, really tough act for him to follow this year. He did it in every sense of the term. I think he was a better player, but I think he was a tremendous leader. I think he was a tremendous example for everyone else on that team. I think his intangibles, his purpose driven approach to this season, his intensity, his effort, his business-like approach, that set a tone for this whole team, and that is what really made this Purdue team special, in my opinion. Obviously, Braden Smith's emergence into an elite player was the biggest difference from a basketball perspective with this team, in conjunction with Zach Edey's improvement. But also, I think just the purpose that this team played with from day one of this season really, really set them apart. I think it was Honolulu where Purdue really, really laid down the gauntlet and told everybody, I don't know what that even means, but they laid down the gauntlet. They drew a line in the sand. They made a statement, shall we say, that they were not messing around this year. That what happened to them the year before was the year before and nothing more. That rhymes. And that this was a completely different team. This was a better team. This was an elite team. And when they won the Maui Invitational, that was kind of the signature moment where they kind of announced their presences. Presence or presences? There's multiple players on the team, so you could go with the multiple, but Purdue collectively announced its presence. It's complicated. Anyway, um, Honolulu was where Purdue really, really showed itself to be a Final Four national title contender. You never want to draw too many conclusions too quickly because college basketball seasons are long and often tumultuous. From there on out, Purdue, and you've heard me say this 100 times. If you're actually listening when I talk, I don't know if you are. I wouldn't if I were you. Um, every college basketball team is entitled to a handful of just no-shows every year. That is the nature of the volatility of young people, where you just have a couple of games every year, where you just don't have it, you just phone it in, and you get your head handed to you. You have bad weeks sometimes. Purdue never phoned in a game. Again, up until the UConn game, all of their losses were simply about turnovers. Purdue didn't play horribly in those games. They just turned the ball over. You could conflate those two things together if you want, but I don't think that's necessarily reflective of reality. I don't think Purdue really had just a bad week. I think there was that one stretch in the season where they had to survive at Rutgers. There were a couple other games there where Purdue kind of had to sweat a little bit, but when Purdue didn't play great, they still won, and they still often won looking good doing it. They never had that week where they lost two in a row or something like that. I think that was really a reflection of this team's maturity, this team's experience together, this team's drive, all of those things that if Hallmark made college basketball cards, those sort of things would be on there. All of that cliche type of stuff was true and was genuinely applicable. It's stuff you just kind of say about teams sometimes. But I think this was the season that really legitimized all of those things sometimes you say about good teams. They played with a purpose. They played really well together. They played with maturity. Their experience showed, and all of that stuff. It helped that you had Zach-Edey. It helped that Braden Smith obviously became an elite player this year. It wasn't necessarily Zach-Edey's team as much as it was Zach-Edey and Braden Smith's team. I think the combination thereof was Purdue's foundation, whereas the year before it was Zach-Edey. This year it was Zach-Edey and Braden Smith because those two worked so well together. Purdue changed its offense to feature those two together more than just the two of them kind of being in silos like they were the year before. I don't think people perceive Purdue to have been just Zach-Edey walks down the floor, jogs down the floor, carves out his space, and just mashes people. That was not really true. This was more of a ball screen offense by Purdue. And you have to give Purdue and Matt Painter and his staff a lot of credit. They didn't have to change the way they changed. This was a much different team, more than people realize, than it was the year prior. A lot of coaches would have just said, hey, you know what? We're good as we are. We were just a number one seed in the NCAA tournament. Our guards were only freshmen. We'll just keep doing what we're doing here. Instead, they made a lot of changes, and a lot of those changes had March in mind. And one of them was the tweaks to the offense, empowering Braden Smith to shoot off ball screens, and thus making Braden Smith really the first pressure point defenses had to worry about, as opposed to it being Zach-Edey. Now, that said, it was Zach-Edey and Braden Smith as that first pressure point. But Braden Smith, really, that first decision defenses had to make was how to guard him on ball screens. And I think that was a pretty profound change by Purdue in the offseason that paid off in a big, big way, obviously. Obviously, putting Trey Kaufman-Renn in the starting lineup was a change Purdue didn't necessarily have to make, but they wanted offense. They wanted go-to guys. They wanted scorers on the floor. Scarred by the fact that they couldn't score 60 points in the NCAA tournament in the first round the year before against FDU. Again, a change Purdue didn't have to make. It could have just sat there and banked on organic improvement and the status quo and all that. And I think that's something Purdue didn't really get credit for all throughout this season, is how much they changed when they didn't necessarily have to change. Matt Painter was very aggressive in trying to optimize this team for the NCAA tournament as much as anything. That's not to say that they weren't worried about a Big Ten championship or starting strong or anything like that, but they made bold moves in the offseason that all paid off in a big way. And I think people generally across the nation miss that about this Purdue team. That was a really big story. I think the other real transformation in this team obviously was one that you could have expected, but also one that you didn't want to take for granted, and that's the three-point shooting. That was the single biggest thing that held Purdue back last year. Uh, Purdue was like a 33% shooting team when they had personnel that jibed with a much better percentage, and it just didn't shoot well the year before collectively. Part of that was probably youth. Um, Part of it was probably just general inconsistency on certain individuals' part. Part of it was just that inexplicable lack of confidence that showed up at the end of the year. People didn't want the ball, things like that. I think, obviously Lance Jones made a difference here. His fearlessness, his wanting of the ball, I don't know if that's the proper way to term that, really was a mentality change for this Purdue team. Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer obviously made the progress you expected them to make between year one and year two. That's what Purdue was banking on. That's what it overtly said prior to this season, is that Matt Painter would go back and talk about like John Diebler's and people like that in the Big Ten before, where they didn't shoot great as freshmen, but you knew how great they were at shooting. And it was year one to year two where that really showed up. Now, could you have expected Purdue to be like a 40+% three-point shooting team as opposed to going from 32 to 36 on its way to 40, something like that? That was the biggest part of this, is Purdue went from a below average shooting team, despite all the investment they made in that particular aspect of the game, to an elite shooting team. Purdue was in the mid 40s much of this season. They were number one in the country a lot of the season. Maybe at the end of the season, I haven't looked at the final stats. But that didn't just improve like was expected. That skipped a step. It went from the bottom to the top. And huge part of the reason why Purdue, again, was one of the best offenses in college basketball. Also, much like Zach Edey's improvement this year, unlocked by Braden Smith. The best move Purdue made in the last 12, 15 months was just telling Braden Smith after his freshman year, we're cutting you loose, do your thing, shoot the ball, play off of what they do to you, and we're gonna run you off a bunch of ball screens every single game. And that was the transformative move Purdue made above any other. He had an unbelievable year, and he's an unbelievable player. He's going to be the best point guard in Purdue history if he's not already on the backs of 2 seasons established himself as such. I think that Purdue has established itself now. This isn't a one-off deal. I'm not saying they're going to the Final Four every other year here, but I think there's something to be said for once you break that glass ceiling, the path is clear. You know what it takes. The importance of leadership now comes to the forefront. These guys who did this, who witnessed up close the approach that team took here in March into April, all throughout the season, that needs to get passed down from the people who were part of it to the people who are going to be coming in after. Where Purdue went sideways way back many years ago, I understand. I'm dating myself by talking about this stuff, since a lot of you are younger and might not even remember like 2011, 2012. Maybe some of you were born in 2012. I don't know. But their leadership really fell off until Raphael Davis came along and kind of fixed it single-handedly. I think it's kind of up to Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman and Fletcher Lawyer and the like now to really pass down a lot of the lessons that were learned from this season. Not that anybody needed lessons, but just make it known to the younger guys. I think it was critical, really important for the Miles Colvins and the Camden Heidies and so on and so forth to have seen this up close, to have been part of it, to understand what's important in basketball, what wins in college basketball, as opposed to just the general physical stuff and the offensive X's and O's, the defensive X's and O's, just the intangible stuff, just the approach. And for that to really become part of Purdue's enduring culture here moving forward. Sorry, I don't know what's going on with my eye here. I think that's the single biggest thing moving forward. But outside of that, Purdue is clearly established now as a team that's not going anywhere. People who don't know what they're talking about are going to say, hey, Zach-Eady's gone now. Purdue's going to fall off the map. They probably also said that after Caleb Swanigan, Jaden Ivey, Robbie Hummel, who am I forgetting here? Jawan Johnson. Purdue has had a funny way of just having Carson Edwards. Purdue has had a funny way of just having All-Americans just pop up. And Purdue hasn't gone anywhere. It keeps happening. Purdue has an All-American level player in its program right now, and Braden Smith, unbelievable tone setter for the whole program. They've got good pieces coming back, led by Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, and Trey Kaufman-Wren. Some guys who are really going to get better moving forward. I think Purdue is set up here to be really good for a really long time. I think Matt Painter is now Bo Ryan. I think he's got a system that works. I think he's here to stay for quite a while. Obviously, he's not anywhere near the end of the line at Purdue. I think he's going to get back to a Final Four. I'd be surprised if he didn't before he's done. I think Purdue has established itself as the top program in the Big Ten. I don't think that's really debatable anymore. They've not had the national success as a whole that Michigan State has had, but I think you've seen some resignation in Tom Izzo after a couple of these losses to Purdue here, where I think he understands that baton is being passed. Now that Purdue has cracked that final weekend of the season, I think that that coupled with having 3 Big Ten championships in 5 years, whatever it is, coupled with the fact you've been number 1 in the country 3 years in a row, coupled with the fact that you're also so close to having had so much more, considering this really shouldn't count, but I'm just trying to illustrate how good Purdue has been these last 5 years. The Jaden Ivey, Travion Williams team, was a bank 3-pointer away from winning a Big Ten title itself, in which case he would have been, I think, 4 and 5 years, something like that. Purdue has just been really good and really consistent, and there's really not a whole lot of reason to believe that they're gonna drop off. Back in the early 2000s or the early 2010s, you could kind of see it coming to a certain extent. Robbie Hummel, Ryan Smith, Lewis Jackson were transitioning out of the program. There was a void there from a leadership perspective, from a focus perspective, kind of things like that on the roster. And I think Matt Painter learned a lot from those teams, not just in terms of assembling a more skilled, offensive-minded program, but also getting the sorts of guys who are going to fit at Purdue and are going to not let things, go sideways on them. And I think Purdue is here to stay. And I think, this year, the way Purdue is recruiting in terms of continuing to build through the high school ranks and developing players, redshirting guys, things like that, you put yourself at risk of being young every now and then. Purdue's going to be a little bit young this year. They're going to have 6 freshmen coming in. A bunch of them are going to have to play. But they're going to have really important veterans back as well. But Purdue's going to be good again this year. And then when you look at next year, or the year after this one, you got Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer and Trey Kaufman-Wren as seniors. Final Fours in Indianapolis. That's a pretty good, that seems like a pretty good convergence of things lining up. I think this year to come is going to be really fascinating. I think you've got a really good core coming back in your top 5 guys, top 6 guys. Purdue's going to be different. Purdue is going to have to reinvent itself to a certain extent without Zach-Eady, but the one thing that's kind of defined Matt Painter as a coach over all these years is flexibility, adaptability, and kind of figuring things out on the fly. I mean, the team before this one that should have gone to the Final Four, if not for that mousetrap of a bizarre sequence against Virginia, was a completely different team from this one that did go to the Final Four. Completely different, almost no similarities. I think that Purdue's going to have to get back to some things one way or another that have sort of defined it lately. Offensive rebounding comes to mind. Taking care of the basketball is obviously is something that comes to mind. But they are pretty well set up. My screen just went to sleep here, which probably tells me about something about how exciting this content is. Viewers. I need to wrap this up. My dog is barking. Um, so look, on a personal note here, I appreciate all of you guys being with us all year. I really appreciate your loyalty in terms of reading our stuff, watching our stuff, listening to our stuff. This was a weird year for me personally, as many of you know. This was the longest, most travel, arduous season in Purdue basketball history. Um, Want to publicly thank Mike Carmen, who saved my ass this year by doing a lot of the heavy lifting after these games, a lot of the heavy lifting during the week when I wasn't quite up to it. He has been a godsend for our website, and I cannot thank him enough. He bailed us out last year when I had to leave. He really, really was a difference maker for us this year, to use a Danny Hope term. And I can't thank him enough. I will owe him a debt of gratitude until my very last day on this planet. So I want to thank him personally. I hope you all appreciated what he's done for us because he certainly deserves it. He is the best. He is honestly the best. So wanted to make sure I thanked him personally. Also want to mention after, I when you travel a lot, you run into these hilarious little stories. If you were getting off a flight from Minneapolis to Midway back in October, and you never got your luggage from me, it should still be at Midway at the gate. I am a compulsive little story time here. If you're only here for the basketball, you can click this off now. I am a compulsive luggage assistant on flights. If anybody seems to need help lifting their bags, taking their bags down, I am that guy who just pushes you out of the way and pulls your bag down or puts it up. I'm getting on a flight out of Midway to Big Ten Media Day in Minneapolis. Why is Big Ten Media Day and why is the Big Ten Tournament in Minneapolis? Thank you, Kevin Warren. Anyway, so I'm getting on the flight, and this person's about 10 rows ahead of me. And there's no overhead space for his large, inappropriately, should have been checked suitcase. So he has to come back about 10 rows to where I'm sitting to put his bag in the overhead because there wasn't space where he was. Now, you're seeing what kind of trap this person is laying for himself. His bag is 10 rows behind him. When he gets up, what's going to happen? Everyone's getting off the plane. There's no way he's getting his bag. So I sense the trauma he's experiencing here, and I kind of give him a point and a nod that when I get off the plane, I will bring your bag to you out in the airport. And he is very appreciative of this, and I just tell him, just give me a look. Just give me a nod or something to remind me when you get off the plane. And then I forget what the guy looks like. I have no idea what he looks like because I can't keep a thought in my head for more than 10 seconds. So what I do is when the flight lands, I get off the plane, and I'm looking around for the guy, for somebody acknowledging my presence, and there's nobody that I recognize. So what I do is I just grab the bag and I take it with me, figuring he's waiting out by the end of the gate. Nobody. There's nobody there. So I just have this bag that doesn't belong to me, and I take it to the gate, and I'm the guy, or the little check-in counter, and I'm the guy who is like, oh hey, here's a bag that doesn't belong to me. I'm out of here. See ya. Exactly what you want to be doing in an airport. So if you're that guy, and for some reason you were flying back from Minneapolis to Chicago, somewhere in October, go back to Midway and find your bag if you haven't already. So that's what I got. A little story time here to end our rap video season. So we will be back next October, maybe next November, something like that. This season is coming out on DVD just in time for Christmas, so be on the lookout for that. And that's what I got for the 2023-2024 Purdue basketball season. This is Brian Newbert from goldenblack.com. Thank you for watching. Thank you for reading. Thank you for listening. And thank you for processing our materials, however it is you process our materials. And please go check out our website at goldenblack.com. If you've been degenerate enough to be watching these after every game, chances are you're going to like what we have on our website. So that's what I got. Thank you to the Purdue Club Hotel one more time. I don't know what locations we're going to next year. There's a Marquette game at Marquette next year. I'm assuming there's going to be a game in Vegas or Phoenix. There's going to be a game most likely in Texas somewhere 2 years from now when Purdue has to return that Texas A&M game. You're going to have to spread your wings, Purdue Union Club Hotel. I'm going to need Union Club hotels all over the country. So let me know as your expansion continues. So thanks, everybody. Take care.